and blessings, my beautiful souls. My name is Avalon Cameron and welcome back to my channel. Today I am finally getting around to doing a Q&A. So let's get started. I've got my phone here. We're going to start off with one comment that was left over on YouTube because this particular individual did not have an Instagram account. So we'll get to her first. The question is, I'm not on Instagram, so hopefully you see this, which I have, obviously. Being someone who grew up as a hereditary witch steeped in folk traditions of your culture in Brazil, do you ever find yourself being critical or suspicious of modern Western expressions of the craft? Does it feel like it's lacking something? This is actually a really interesting question because I go up and down in this. I have a very firm structure when it comes to magic, and it is something that I have been practicing time and time again. And I only stick with approaches, philosophies, theories, and spells that work. That's it. I experiment quite a bit. But over time, because I've been at this for a really long time, I understand very carefully, very clearly to myself, at least for myself, what works and what doesn't work. This is not to say that what doesn't work for me won't work for you. It's more that that's the critical area of my brain. I'm like, I've used that combination before and it did sweet fuck all. And so the inner judgment steps in, but only from a place of personal experience, because I never criticize other people who are practicing their craft in a way that works for them. At the end of the day, if it works for you, do it. Who am I to say, don't do that? If it didn't work for me, fine. You know, we're all made of different stuff. We all operate under different philosophies. We all hold a very different kind of energy. Our energetic power points are all calibrated rather differently, and therefore what works for one person won't necessarily work for the other. But for me, the criticism, the comparison, that comparative mindset comes from the fact that if it hasn't worked for me, my mind immediately goes, oh, that's not gonna work. But that's not to say that it won't. It's just a little reaction, a little reflex in my brain. Other times I'm looking at, you know, sort of Western practices, and I think things like, that's unnecessarily cumbersome. That's unnecessarily convoluted. But it's not an internal harsh judgment. It's more an observation than anything else. And I do believe that Western culture, you know, go about their, you know, practices of the craft really ritualistically, and at times that can just be too much, unnecessarily too much. But I'll address that in another video because I'm planning on doing a video specifically focused on witchcraft and ritual and whether or not that is essential. All right, so we're on Instagram and I'm going to start from the bottom up. So we have a question here that states, can you talk about traditional witchcraft? Traditional witchcraft is an ambiguous term. Are we talking about traditional witchcraft from, you know, the British geographical area, or are we talking about, you know, personal traditions within witchcraft? You know, I will speak on, you know, traditional witchcraft of the Cornish variety, thanks to many of Gemma Gary's books. And I understand that traditional witchcraft sits outside of the practice of Wicca, for instance, and is very anchored into a specific geographical location. In the case of Gemma Gary's, you know, A Cornish Book of Ways, that is an example of traditional witchcraft from the Cornish perspective. And so outside of that, my tradition of witchcraft, my tradition of folk magic, more to the point, is very much family tradition that has expanded out onto other people that, you know, belonged to the Coven. So it's not just an internal family thing. It's internal family, yes, blood family, and then spiritual family as well. So if I was to call my non-biological Aunt Izalia, who was my grandmother's best friend, who, you know, frequented our coven, who was deeply immersed in our structure and our style and our processes, she would do things in a very similar manner to what I, or how I do them. And I think that that's really beautiful, to share traditions with spiritual family as well as blood family. But traditions like that, the word tradition, I apply that very loosely, simply because It's how we've done something over the years. We've all got traditions. Doesn't necessarily need to apply to witchcraft. You all have your own traditions within your family. So the way that you do things, the recipes that you may cook, and on and on. That is a little bit of what it's like within the constructs of a traditional folk magical practice, is we all approach specific tasks in a similar way. There might be 2, 3, 4, 5 cures for hangovers, for instance, or headaches, and we would know all 5 of them. And, you know, depending on who was recommending, they would recommend their favorite, and I would recommend my favorite, you know, from that little bunch of 5 that we knew. And so traditions are really beautiful, and they're very closed as well. My family tradition is very closed, and people who went through their initiations within the Umbanda religion are then exposed to our family's, you know, traditional methods of folk magic, and that's usually how it happens. So it's part initiatory, part, you know, blood earned, and there's still things that my grandmother taught me, that my grandmother taught my mother, that my mother taught me, that nobody else knows. You know, there are things that perished along with my grandmother and my great-grandmother when they went to the grave. There are certain, you know, prayers, spoken word charms, cures, things like that, that just disappeared. And that's a real shame. But I don't even know if I've answered your question, but traditional witchcraft, you know, comes in many shapes and sizes, and the word tradition, you know, hits differently depending on where you are and what type of magic you're referring to, as I've previously said. So that's a little bit of an answer. Let me know if you want me to expand on that answer. Next question. What is your opinion on spiritual slumps and taking breaks to be more in the mundane world for a while? I don't believe in spiritual slumps. I understand that they happen, but I know that they can be avoided. They really can be avoided. It's a funny thing. And magic and the mundane. Ooh, this is what I was saying about unnecessarily complicating magic and witchcraft. You don't have to be on all the time. Witches are typically on all the time anyway, but you don't have to be on and consistently in that realm of ritual and doing and spirit work and ancestral work. You don't have to do that if that's not your bag. If you need a lighter practice, it's up to you to create that beautiful light practice. You know, you might find yourself working in a particular cyclical vibe, and you might find yourself getting really witchy at the dark half of the year. So we're talking autumn and winter. And then you might find that you want to lighten things up a little bit during spring and summer. But find a rhythm that works and go with that. And don't necessarily uncomplicate magic when it doesn't need to be. Sometimes witchcraft is, you know, writing a little petition and putting it in your shoe and going about your day and just remembering to stomp a couple of times to really piss someone off. Little mild hex work there. It's not too encroaching on someone's comfort, although it can be if it's done well with a specific amount of ingredients, but that's another story. Spiritual slumps. When I think about a spiritual slump, here's how I see it. I know what it takes to practice really solid protection magic, and there is no way that I could have a spiritual slump with the amount of things that I need to do when it comes to protection magic. You know, fortifying my boundaries, taking spiritual baths, cleansing and smoke clearing, and, you know, like rearranging things and actually physically cleaning my house and then spritzing it and spraying it and sprinkling it with powders. Like, this is a almost daily occurrence. And I consider it to be a part of, you know, comfortable living. Just like I'm going to wash my dishes, I'm also going to do my protection magic. They go hand in hand. They're very practical. And so I'm practicing a form of magic every day, whether I realize it anymore or I'm not, because I've been at this for a really long time. And so the things that I do in the mornings, like dab myself a little, you know, Florida water and do a little spritz and light some incense and just little things like that to perfume and activate my space. they become second nature to me and just a part of my everyday life. And I think that even if I was to take a break from magic, a break from philosophy, a break from witchcraft, ritual, and all of those things, which I can't see how that's possible. If I were, I'd still be doing certain acts of magic, and so I don't think it's possible. And it would be very hard. It would be very hard to disassociate witchcraft from a practitioner. And I also find that the world isn't as mundane as people like to believe that it is. There's magic everywhere. You know, if you're not practicing your craft and you're still out in nature, you're firmly immersed in magic, in the magic of nature specifically. You're grounding, you may be centering, you may be like expelling toxins as you're moving through, which are all slight, small, beautiful, natural acts of magic. So yeah, that's a difficult one. But if you need to take a break, take a freaking break. You don't have to be on all the time, as I was saying. We don't need to complicate witchcraft. It doesn't need to be something that is strict and done every single day. That's not how my magic is. That is not how I roll. I have moods. I have many a mood, actually, and my magic is a reflection of my mood. Whatever kind of magic I'm doing, whether it be petition writing, protection magic, home and hearth stuff, whether I'm cooking, which is a rare occurrence, but you know, it's different every time. All right, I've got one here. Can I reuse charm bags, or do I need to dispose and make new ones each time? I don't like a lot of waste, and so I'm gonna go ahead and say, yeah, dispose of them thoughtfully. This is also a really good time to speak on the subject of using natural fibers, because one of the best ways to undo, hand back, deactivate a charm is to disassemble it and return the items to the earth. You can return the items to a specific patch of earth. I've seen some practitioners surrender their items to a crossroads and let the spirits deal with it. I'm not a real fond of that. Crossroad magic for me is for road openers. But I would always consider doing a new charm and just surrendering your old charm to the earth as it is, or disassembling it and just leaving it there to be reclaimed, which is why we use natural fibers, because if you're going to surrender it to the earth, those natural fibers are not going to cause any kind of, you know, adverse reaction within the soil, within the earth, and it'll just naturally decompose. So cottons and silks and things like that are best used, or burn it. Surrendering things to fire is wonderful. Again, this is why we use natural fibers, because you don't want anything melting. All right, what advice would you give to your younger self about tarot in particular and witchcraft in general? To my younger self, tarot. Advice. Start collecting early. Had I started collecting tarot at the age of 5, I would have a rather robust collection, or maybe not, because I have recently surrendered a lot of my collection when I moved. No, but in all seriousness, I would say that some of the best advice I would give to younger readers, and things that and the advice that I tend to give to my own children, is to read what you see. This is a big thing that I notice. You know, you can remember all the facts from all the books that you've ever read, and every time you look at a card, you're going to project that onto the card, and you're going to inadvertently sidestep the beauty, the detail, etc. in the artwork itself. So step 1, always take into consideration exactly what you see in that card. Every tarot deck is very different, and therefore you're going to get a different feel, a different reaction, a different facet. you know, of philosophy from tarot within multiple decks, right? So it's really important to read what you see and start getting really good at reading what you see, because you read what you see first, you layer that onto your foundational knowledge, and boom, you have a good reading. Witchcraft. Actually, I would like my younger self to give my older self some advice. You know, back in the day, back when I was growing up, tag locks and personal effects were obtained by devious means. Okay, so you had to leave specific acts of magic at someone's front door, or you had to obtain hair, nails, blood, etc. from a particular individual, and that made for extraordinarily entertaining moments, like absolutely extraordinarily entertaining moments. Seeing my elders try to obtain certain things from other people, you know, working some really dodgy love magic with people's things, It gets entertaining. It got entertaining. Now these days, you know, I guess the vibe of sympathetic magic is firmly there. If it looks like it, then it is it. You know, pretty basic. So I would say, honestly though, don't overcomplicate it. It's something that I find myself saying a lot these days, especially in my older years. You know, I'm firmly middle-aged now, and I love that. I love that there's a certain security and a certain wisdom that comes to me in this moment, a certain amount of certainty actually, and everything's about time and a place. Don't overcomplicate things, and there's a time and a place. There's a time and a place for specific magic. There's a time and a place for ritual. There's a time and a place for everything. And road openers are pretty much the only act of magic that you will ever need to learn, because it can be used in so many ways. There's some wisdom. And what were the most important advices you received from others about tarot and witchcraft along your journey? The most important advice that I received about witchcraft is belief is in the bones. Your whole body reacts to truth, and that everyone's magic sings. It has a harmony, it has a chorus, it has a song. Everyone's blood sings. So belief can be felt in the bones, and one's blood sings. Tarot, important advice, I guess it was really during my late teens to early 20s that information surrounding the court cards was beginning to change. It's around that time anyway, and you know, for a very long time tarot court were people, representative of people, and over time that became, you know, something that was being adjusted. And so tarot court still can represent people, but not just people. They can represent so many other things. And you know, learning to understand that, getting that tip early was very helpful. So that was important. That was important. And also that the Celtic cross should not be offered up to beginners, because it is a pain in the ass, far too difficult, and there are so many other tarot spreads that will get you clearer, more concise readings, or no spread at all, because I'm a freeform reader, so I believe in freeform readings these days. So there you go. Alright, I get stuck in tarot when a positive card is in a negative position in a spread. Okay, then what you can do is you can shuffle your deck with the intention of pulling a clarifying card, and then you can lay that on top of the positive card in a negative position. To better understand it, to help you to unpack it. But a positive card in a negative position, every tarot card, well, almost all tarot cards have a positive and a negative aspect. Positive and negative are not necessarily the best terms to be used there, but they can be viewed in a positive or a negative light depending on the surrounding cards. And so it's really good to practice pulling the negative out of every single card that you believe very firmly echoes only positive, because I guarantee you will find that even the Sun card can be negative. An Ace of Cups can be negative. The World card can be negative, but it's not in the same way as you may think. So working with those negative qualities, working with reversals and ideas of reversals can be very, very helpful. But yeah, pulling clarifying cards, gold. Gold. All right, the real Samantha Jones. I'd love to ask you about bilingualism. That's a word. I was surprised when I found out you came to Australia when you were 16. You don't have a trace of a Brazilian accent. I come from an Eastern European family, and most of my relatives who came to Australia as teenagers speak English but with an accent. So I guess I'm curious, did you always speak English with your dad? Have you always been bilingual? Does English or Portuguese feel like your first language? I've always been quadlingual. I grew up speaking a lot of different languages because of a lot of different influences and the fact that my family traveled a bit. I don't retain any too many or a lot of the other languages that I learned. But I used to be quite good at speaking Spanish and French and a little bit of Italian. Had a crack at Germany when I was German when I was really young, and it didn't bother me too much, but I don't retain that. My first language is Portuguese. I have always spoken English because my father is Australian and my mother is Brazilian. My mother speaks very terrible English. My father obviously speaks very clear English and pretty heavily accented Portuguese, but because I was raised in a family that spoke both languages equally, I grew up without any accent whatsoever. I probably have more of an accent in Portuguese now simply because I predominantly speak English. I don't speak Portuguese anywhere near as much or as often as I used to. I do every day here with my sister, but it's not the same as that. It doesn't have that equal balance anymore. So yeah, my kids who are not necessarily bilingual, if I was to say a word in Portuguese to them, they would be able to enunciate to perfection that word, to the point if they said it you would think that they're a little Brazilian kid. And my sister and I are always laughing at that. They've got a really good grasp on language because they've always been quite immersed in language, alternative languages and things of that nature. So yes, having said that, my little sister, both of them who live here, very, very strong Brazilian accents. I put it down as that they are crap with language. I am pretty okay with it. That's the only difference. My big sister, who lives over there, whenever she speaks English, it comes out with an Australian accent. So hers is solid, but she also spent an equal number of years in each country. So it makes a difference. But yeah, no accent. Yeah, it's pretty fun. All right, so we're moving on here with card in tarot that you find most confronting and why. I'm obsessed with the Eight of Swords. Obsessed. Yes, obsessed is the best word. And I find it very confronting, especially for this current time, this current moment in humanity. For me, the Eight of Swords represents deep-seated conditioning. Conditioning that begins at birth. Conditioning that comes from our family, from our education systems, our society, our culture, our place of employment and our personal identity and everything like that. It's very, very ingrained, it's deep-seated, and it shapes the way that we perceive ourselves. And it can be very restricting. It can be, not always, but it can be extraordinarily restricting to the point where, you know, people are bound. Their actual spirit, their entire soul feels very bound to me in a belief that just isn't true. and therefore they can never explore their true potential. They can never tap into the seed of their power because they don't believe that they have any at all. We've seen the symbolism of the 8 of Swords, and it's a person bound, you know, surrounded by 8 swords, blindfolded, and just, it's a mental thing. It's so heavily ingrained that it exists inside the scope of the mind, and it's a deep-seated belief, and it can really puppeteer everything that we do. So that is the card that I find the most interesting, the most confronting, the most disturbing, the most alluring. And that's the card that I tend to work with when I am doing any kind of shadow work, because I want to dig deep into that for myself. All right, when will you launch your Bones of the Bone Stone? Don't know. It's ready to go. I just don't know how I'm going to launch it, when I feel like launching it. I'm a little too busy to do anything about it right now, but I'll get there, and it is going to happen. When can we start booking readings again? No rush. I know you've come out. I'm taking readings again as of now. I'm just playing catch up. I've got around 7 left to do. So I've been playing catch ups, doing readings every single day for a period of time. I should be doing readings today, but my young daughter, well, not my young daughter, my eldest daughter is homesick and needs some attention. She's chilling now, so I thought I'd do this video instead. When starting out with plants and different herbs, do you have an essential set of starters or must-haves? Do you keep those more in bulk? You have come from the gods. This question, it's just like, I want to talk about this so badly. Like, I just recently did a video for Coven on all of the protection magic curios and ingredients that I personally stock up on, and so I recommend others to do so. But if I'm going to give you a running list, this feels exciting, folks, okay? So top tier, top of the charts, I'm going to go with rosemary. Second to that, lavender. In fact, they could toggle in space because lavender is so multi-purpose. And I know that people don't necessarily all love the scent of lavender, but the magic of lavender is undeniable. Its approaches, its applications, everything. It's so good. So lavender and rosemary, first and foremost. And then I would move down to lemongrass. I would also go to something along the lines of chamomile for success, fire, expansion, prosperity, that kind of beautiful magic. Cinnamon is always very good to stock up on. Cloves, black cloves, very good to stock up on. I like something along the lines of an intuitive herb as well, something like a mugwort or an eyebright. You can also use yebra santa. Very good as well. Oh, there's so many. I like blue cornflower just for the way that it looks. I always work with rose, so red roses remind me of the red mother or the red goddess or my own mother, but rose in white or red formats, chef's kiss good, have to have it. Goes into a lot of my cleansing baths. Yes, that is the truth. Orange peel, love me some orange peel, garlic skins, onion skins. Coffee, sugar, honey, all of those things. I typically recommend that people go with culinary herbs. So go through, get yourself some, you know, culinary sage that you can dry, some thyme that you can dry, some rosemary that you can dry, and some basil. And then beyond that, you know, there are just some incredible multi-purpose herbs. I'm a big fan of multi-purpose herbs. I don't really love working with herbs that have one function and one function only. So I like myself to, I like that I can have access to a variety of ingredients, and that I can use lavender one day for healing, but also in another day for prosperity, and another day for lifting the spirits and a happiness or friendship kind of spell. Like, these are the types of ingredients that I recommend. So yeah, I should do a video on that actually, like a witch's apothecary starter pack. Like, these are the herbs, just from my own personal perspective. And yes, I do store my favorites in bulk, in massive jars. because I do use a lot of them. And here we go. I think this is our last one. So yay. What decks do you use when you do shadow work, and how often do you delve into it? Shadow work happens fairly consistently. Whenever I feel like I'm getting triggered by something, whenever I feel like I'm spiraling in a negative pattern, whenever I find myself in a bad mood that lasts more than 1 to 2 days, I know that I've got to deal with something, so I then go and do a little shadow work there for myself. It's always very raw and tender. The decks that I personally work with are the Darkness of Light. I really love that deck for shadow work. The Marielle Tarot, I really love that deck for shadow work. My own Bone Stone, love that for shadow work. That's about it, yeah. You know, I do from time to time play around with obscure decks like the Margaret Peterson Tarot, and the Hidden Waters Tarot can be very, very good for shadow work as well, but I find myself really drawn to the Darkness of Light Tarot, the Darkness in Light, the Darkness of Light. You get the one that I'm talking about. It's aesthetically pleasing and it works for me. And the Marielle is just an old favorite when it comes to that. The Bone Stone I work with because it's my deck, obviously, and because it speaks to me on a totally different level. And but at times I feel like I need something outside of my own creative brain to dig a little deeper. So yeah, there's some beautiful decks out there. You know, the Bohemian Gothic Tarot of the Vampires by Ian Daniels, the Chimonier, which is very alluring, very interesting. Oh, there's quite a few. I find that the Wild Unknown can be pretty interesting in terms of shadow work. But there's quite a few decks, and I think that there is also a solid misconception that when it comes to shadow work decks, that they need to be dark. And for me, they need to be dark. That's a truth that I adhere to. But I also understand that we all respond to imagery, art, etc. in a very different way. And so as long as you are feeling somewhat triggered by your artwork, you're on a good wicket with whatever deck you're working with. And for me, friendly decks that look beautiful, that don't that inspire awe and harmony and calm and all of that, don't work for me during a shadow work period. So it's up to each person to be able to find that, you know, that gorgeous deck that just works for them. Yep. Truesies. All right, my beauties. Well, that is it for this Q&A. Thank you to everyone who submitted such thoughtful questions. There were some really good ones there, and there are some questions that came up that I feel like I would like to do a specific witchy chat style video on. And so I'm thinking about doing just that. But in the meantime, thanks so much for chilling out with me, and for the lovely questions, and for the mental stimulation that I needed to get me through today. All right, my beautiful souls, thanks for watching. I will chat to you again soon. If you've liked this video, you know what to do. Like, share, around, thumbs, subscribe, you know the things. All right, my beauties, I'll talk to you later. Bye. Mwah.